Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Reddit Quickie from the subreddit HFY, called Echoes of Songs Past Part 2. Written by Legal. The link to the original will be down below. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Stepping through the gate was always an interesting experience. It felt like a flash for a moment of all the planets, stars, and space between the two connected the gates was suddenly compressed, and in that moment, beyond comprehension, you could see it all. Then you were on the other side and everything was normal. Or as normal as it could be depending on where you were. For Rooks, where she was seemed to be another graveyard. Around her stretched the bare corpses of hundreds of champions. But unlike the other side of the gate, where they were arranged in a circle facing the gate at the center, here they were all arranged in a path facing away from the circle, towards some hills in the mountains in the distance. It was clear to her, after a moment, that these champions had all died fighting. As she slowly turned Jack around to view the area, she could see an ocean stretching out around the three sides. The gate had been placed at the edge of a peninsula, with a sheer cliff face dropping off into the waters below. Clearly, this gate had been placed with a defense in mind. Turning back to what she began to slowly move Jack through the rows of dead champions towards the direction that they were all facing. Golden reeds and grass swayed gently in the breeze, and the sky above them was rich blue. With her view over the ocean here, it was almost a beautiful vista if it weren't for all the dead champions that she was walking through. Then, when she started to see the skeletal remains of demons, for so long as she could remember, back even to the Oldens, the demons had been enemies of everything else. They ate, consumed, and spread wherever they could. Only be concentrated efforts by multiple nations could drive them back. So, most of the time, they were simply contained wherever possible. The fact that there had been a battle here involving hundreds of champions and lost made Rook shudder to think how many demons had fought against him. "Jack, do you hear any songs?" she asked, feeling the hairs on the back of her neck stand on end as she saw the demon champions remaining twisted together in eternal deathlocks. "Pinging," Jack replied as she heard the soft ping call out from his chassis. Much like before was a burst of static, and then the songs came through the vox for a moment before her screen flickered and she stopped as something else new happened. A small window she had never seen opened up in the center of her screen, and she was looking at some man in a set of clothes that she didn't know. It took her a moment to realize that though he had an Olden based on his new few relics, she had seen placed in museums in Clownspire. This was General Zzzt. She grimaced as the image flickered and static filled the air for a moment before it got clear again. Testing grounds completely overrun, no idea how they got to hive onto the planet. As she watched the window before her, the man looked away and she could hear songs of the champions in the background with explosions in the distance. "We've lost 3C and the complex. All other gates have been detonated." The figure was focused on something else for a moment, as Roos wondered which C's they had lost. Surely there had been more than 3. Did it mean something that she didn't understand? The image crackled and jumped a bit as she saw the man flicker. Forced to issue redoubt command. "We cannot let this gate fall. The Imperator has..." More static had been recognized the name of Jack's behavior earlier. "Last chance, suicide or not. Zzzt. Taking care of all viable frames and advancing past the shield maintains to destroy the Nexus. One way or another, this all ends here." The man in the window seemed to sag a little as he took a deep breath. "Omega is lost. The fleet is lost. But hope remains. If you're alive to hear this, then I guess we succeeded. If you can try to find our echoes in the complex aura, if nothing else, then just hear our song." The window shifted and she could see the main feed of whatever champion the Olden was inside. It was the same peninsula, but night, and hundreds of champions dead around her now were still alive, pushing forward as she saw explosions, pulses, and traces filling the sky. She gasped softly as she looked, and she could see the night sky itself seemed to be on fire, with what looked like a massive cloud of falling rocks, or possibly debris. Something she'd never seen the likes of before, not even in the old legends. The screen blinked and she was faced with an image of a white human skull set atop a black champion frame, flanked by 2 golden lightning bolts. "Identify," Root said. "First vanguard, tip of the spear, the best of the best of the best. Battle, commendations, and honors." She saw a wall of text begin to scroll up past the window in the high Alden. It was too small and moving too fast for her to read, but she got the idea. She wondered why she'd never heard of this place before as the first vanguard. Many of the olden units in the Skate War were known to them from the remains and relics. Though she realized then that it would only seem like they knew of many of them, because she knew all of the ones that they'd found. How many were there that were at the end of the war? As big as the Republic was getting, or even the Empire, she knew that they couldn't even compare to what the Oldens had established before. "Jack, what is a mega?" she asked, hoping for some insight. "Ancient letter, cultural significance in representing the end, finality." Rooks felt a shiver run down her spine and told her that, considering the rows of dead champions around her, that seemed to all be too literal. But she wondered what had happened here exactly. The image she saw from the window showed her that the champion was marching forward. Why then were their bodies here, broken and twisted in a defensive posture, as they seemed to be falling back to the gate? The Olden had said if someone had heard his message, then they had succeeded. But succeeded at what? Or was he going wrong and something else had happened? Rooks had no answers. "All right, Jack, let's see what's out there." She started to press for an advance over the hills, but Jack stopped. "Negative, redoubt is active. One frame must maintain watch over the gate at all times." That was new to her. All of this was, she wished that the Codex had mentioned any of the sort of behavior of the champions. "All right, am I allowed to exit and walk around on foot?" she asked next. "Acceptable. Contact with frame must be maintained." She felt the stinger in her spine detached from the seat, and she could get up. She turned and crawled out of Jack and heard him speak again, entering mode eternal vigil. That too sent a shiver down her spine. She had always thought that Jack was a friend. When she'd first found him and he'd connected to her so easily, she'd been ecstatic. Not many pilots got a fresh champion out of hibernation. They'd always been so well meshed together in personality and thought. But now, it was like someone else had replaced her friend with an identical yet different person. She didn't like it one bit. As she climbed down his leg and dropped to the ground, she looked around from her graveyard of broken champions and dead demons. Trying to figure out where to go, she focused on one of the stranger frames that she had seen. Instead of legs like normal, it had several wheels, some of which were stacked on top of each other. With a metal bracelet, it looked like it stretched around them, and several antennae and dishes on top of the broad flat hull. She walked towards it, and she felt the dirt beneath her crack and compact with each step, kicking up red puffs of dust. It took her a moment, but she realized that the entire area was caked and coated with the red fluid that the champions bled at times. She knew that it wasn't literally their blood, but most pilots thought of it as such. As she got closer to the squat, low frame, she realized that it was peppered in holes, and bony spines were sticking up out of it. Demon arrows. Once she got to it, she realized that the strange wheeled bracelets on the side were about as big as she was tall, and she slowly circled around the back, where she saw the hatch set up in the hull several meters off the ground. Slowly climbing up the rungs in the back, she pulled the hatch open and then screamed out in surprise as a body fell out of the hatch. She nearly lost her grip of it, barely managed to cling to it, and gasped as she looked down at the body that had hit the ground. Climbing back down, she realized that it wasn't a body, but one of the olden suits that they used to wear. As she slowly rolled it over and saw the usually reflective silver face that had been smashed, and inside was the fragments of a skull that had either broken from the fall or possibly in death. She had taken a deep breath and then climbed back into the now open hatch. Inside, she saw the olden bodies encased in the protective suits. To her left and right, several were sitting in chairs slumped back, or even over the consoles that they seemed to have been working on. In the center was a long glass table that was cracked in several places. She could see places of the roof where the demon arrows had punctured it. As she stepped forward through the hull, she set her hand on the glass table to try and squeeze around one of the demon arrows. stuck into the desk, and then jumped back in surprise as the table flickered to life and all around her the scenes activated. Bravo 22 is down. Bravo 23 is down. Bravo 24 is down. I need immediate. Bring it. Bring it. Correcting course. Adjusting. Bearing 5. Mark 20. They just keep coming. They just... Imperative firing. Ease. Even amongst the sudden cacophony of voices calling out around her, she heard what sounded like a massive artillery piece going off and drowned out everything else but a few words. Yeah, take that! The big ugly is down. Hotel November Charlie in reposition to grid 33 Juliet 7. 2 more, they're pushing us back. We saw the flash. They had to be the Nexus. Why are they still coordinated? Tube strike pulses are all I have left. Keep singing, brothers and sisters. Our song shall carry us through. Rooks were surrounded by the echoes of dead pilots as the song of their champions filled the air for a moment and then went quiet as the table went dark and the screens around her flickered and turned black once more. It had been 3 centuries since the formation of the Republic, probably another 4 centuries before that and the First Awakening, and she had no idea how long the Great Dream had lasted. Yet some of the olden tech still worked. Their skills in maneuvering never ceased to amaze her. She wished that it hadn't just nearly given her a heart attack, but it was still impressive. She had to gently pull and push a few of the olden bodies out of the way to get to the front of the room set into the champion's frame as she looked around. There was another hatch up front that led to a similar room to the sides of Insider Jack where she sat. But there were 2 chairs side by side. The console before them was blank except for a single glowing green button at the center. Despite knowing that it could be a terrible idea, Rooks had been told that the Oldens considered green to be a good color and couldn't help herself but press the button. There was a soft click somewhere and she heard a voice like the champion's. Cargo bay hatch opened. Hello? Rooks asked and she looked around. Hello, champion? She tried again. She even pressed a few more buttons on the console, but they were all blank now. Turning back, she made her way back out the room and past the dead Oldens, once more trying not to disturb their final resting place more than she already had. As she climbed back down to the ground outside, she saw that another hatch was open now, set into the base of the frame. It must have been totally flush with the rest of the frame, because she hadn't even noticed it when she first climbed up. She reached up and slowly tugged the hatch open as she heard a hiss of air rushing inside. Once she opened it up fully, there was a soft flicker before a blue-white light in the ceiling came to life and illuminated the interior. She gasped softly then as she stepped inside and saw what seemed to be a pristine olden armory, or the like. There was an angular form of grav bike, several gleaming metal olden crates in the back, and the side of rack of weapons. Stepping in further, she reached out with her left hand and slowly brushed over the olden guns set in the rack. She had only seen these in a museum in Cloudspire before, and they were in rough shape. That's when she realized she hadn't brought any guns with her past joust. So she picked up the first weapon in the rack and slowly looked it over. It seemed like it was freshly oiled and cleaned. She could even smell whatever oil the Oldens used and some sort of citrus-smelling cleaning agent. Unlike any guns the Republic could make, the Oldens would tuck the magazine further back into the weapons. She wasn't exactly sure why, but even their shorter rifles were more accurate than the Republic-made small arms. She grabbed 2 magazines for it and was thankful that she always insisted that even her ceremonial leathers had pouches sewn into the waist. She loaded the magazines and marveled at how smooth the action on the weapon was as she chambered the first round. She then adjusted the sling and slung the weapon over her shoulder. Walking further back, she opened the first crate in it and the hole and frowned as she saw it filled with an olive-green drab synth bags. Reaching in, she picked up one and hefted it to her hands for a moment. It felt like there were other packages inside. While curious about what might be, she figured now wasn't the time and set it back into the crate before turning to leave the olden armory. As she shut the hatch, there was another hiss as the door seemed to vanish into the outline of the chassis. No wonder she hadn't seen it. Marshal Rook's hostile presence detected. Please return. She jumped a bit as Jack's voice spoke through the vox, but she quickly turned and rushed across the field over to him. Climbing up his leg and back into the compartment, she pulled the olden rifle from her back and let it click into place in the corner where it was designed to fit. What have you got? she asked as she looked around the screen to see what she could see that she had missed. But the hills ahead of them looked empty. Deathlord class pheromones detected in the atmosphere, he announced, and a window popped up that showed some sort of graphs and images that meant nothing to her. But she knew legends of Deathlords. So, we're dead. I love you, Jack, but there's no way that we can take on a Deathlord. She frowned at that thought and kept scanning the horizon. Deathlord pheromones are only released upon death. They signal the other demons of its demise. They draw them in, Jack explained. So, something on this planet killed a Deathlord. That sounds promising, Rook slowly said as she tried to think about what it might do. Have you found any active champions? This planet is full of echoes. I am sure if I hear the songs of the present or songs of the past. Rooks truly felt like Jack's voice had been a bit more sad since they first discovered the Caldera graveyard, and especially now, too. Well, you detected something serious, and you can't advance past this point to check it out, can you? She asked. Correct. I must guard the gate, he confirmed. She took a breath as she thought over her options and then remembered the bite that she saw in the cargo champion. Okay, well then you wait for the others. I'm going to go scout the area. Do you have any idea where it might be? She asked. Approximately 20 to 25 kilometers north-northeast. Jack replied, and Rooks had the moment to look at his rough map of the area to get an idea of where it was. It is not advised for you to proceed alone. There is a great risk of danger. There's a risk of danger everywhere. This sort of thing is my job. I'm a marshal, remember? She pointed out that she got back up out of her seat to crawl out. Let Trulath and Dariah know what I'm doing, she mentioned as she grabbed her gun and climbed back down. She jogged over to the cargo champion from earlier and set her hand where she knew the hatch to be now. With another soft tester opened up and she slipped inside. As she examined the grab bike for a moment, she wished that she had her goggles, because without them she really wasn't sure how she'd be able to see well while driving. Looking over the crates from before, she walked over, ignoring one that she'd opened first and tried another. It was filled with smaller metal boxes in the same drab olive green as the other. She frowned and then closed it and tried another one. At first, when she looked inside the next crate, she wasn't sure what she was looking at. It looked like bolts of cloth, but then she gasped as she realized what it really was. It was in olden pilot suits. She quickly pulled it out and held it up in the light. It looked intact. Without hesitation, then she set her gun to the side and stripped out of her ceremonial leathers and began to pull the olden suit on instead. She marveled at the feel of the fabric even as she pulled it on. How could they make something so incredibly soft? Either way, once they looked down and frowned, she realized that it was actually a bit loose and baggy in some areas. But considering the olden synth material along the chest, thighs, and back, she knew that it would provide significantly better protection than her leathers. In fact, she was confident that the regular fabric of the main portion of the suit itself might even be better than the ceramic armor of the Republic infantry. She looked back into the crate and moved aside the other suits inside to find a helmet. Pulling it out, she slowly worked it on to her head, glad that she was always kept her head short. Once it was in place, the silver face shield and she had seen on the body slid down into place, and she blinked hard as the bright light was suddenly shining in her eyes. After a moment, she saw text scroll across the face shield before her eyes. Retinal scan not in database. Contact nearest armorer. Minimal access mode activated. Then, to her surprise, the suit shrank slightly, tightening up around her so that it was well fitted and no longer loose and baggy. She hesitantly reached out for a moment and flexed her fingers, twisting her body to the side to get used to the feel of the suit. She didn't feel any resistance from the material as she turned and twisted, and once more wondered when, or if, they would ever come close to replicating this wonder of the Oldens. Grabbing her rifle, she was about to sling it over her shoulder, but when she started, she felt like the rifle got tugged gently back towards her. Confused, she pulled it back as she went to do it again, and she felt like something was tugging her gun back. Rather than resist, she slowly pressed the gun further towards the force and found that there must have been some sort of magnetic built into the back of the suit as the rifle settled into place on her back without the need for the sling. It might take a bit of getting used to, but she could see why that would be useful. Now, fully checking out the olden gear, she walked back into the hatch and pushed it open fully, then up onto the bike. Thankfully, this was a bit of tech that she understood. though it looked to be a much nicer and more powerful version of the grav bikes that she was used to. It was still the same concept. She pressed the engine start button and felt the bike purr to life beneath her. Normally, it was more of a shudder and a rumble, but this thing rose up off the deck smoothly. She very carefully and slowly eased it forward and out of the open hatch and leaned slowly as she turned to face the direction that Jack had told her to go. "That is a good find, Marshal Rooks," Jack said over the box. "Why, thank you, Jack." She waved to Champion, who waved back, which made her smile. Perhaps the Jack she knew was still in there. With that, she began to drive forward, navigating the bones of the champions and the demons strewn across the peninsula. Once she hit the edge of the hill, the remains of the champions began to get further apart, until she had a much more clear path. The grav bike continued to purr as she sped along half of the meters above the ground as smoothly as she could. Just as she crested over the hill, however, she slowed to a stop. While ahead of her and to the right she could see another valley that looked to be full of more dead champions. To the left she saw a town. From the base of the hills out in the town and stretching off the cliff beyond, there were fields and some sort of plants. At the center was most certainly a town. She let out a soft laugh and then wondered if she had been fearful about a dead gate for nothing. Surely, amongst the olden spoils, they must have had plenty of champions capable defeating a Death Lord. Changing her direction to aim towards the town, she zipped through the hills and up along one of the dirt paths that separated the fields. As she zipped along, she looked at either side and wondered where all the people were. She didn't see anyone as she got closer to the town. The houses looked to be rough as well. Even the Blood Rock had nicer-looking buildings than the stone and wood huts that she saw here. As she zipped along up the path and closer to the town, she finally saw signs of life right up at the edge of the town itself. There was a low stone wall built under the buildings. There were two men in front of them with spears in their hands. Her thoughts about them having their own champions might have been overly optimistic, she realized then. As she came to a stop at the opening of the wall, she got off the bike and called out, "Hello!" She tried her first in simple, but the two men just looked at her with wide eyes as they gripped their spears tight. "Do you understand me?" She tried then in Olden. The two just looked at each other for a moment and then back at her, obviously still confused. So she finally tried High Olden. "Can you understand me?" "No words," one of the guards finally replied, and she sighed with relief. "I'm a Marshal Pack Vander, given name Rooks." She spoke slowly but loudly with a clunky tongue, trying to be as clear as she could. "I traveled from a great distance, just activating the gateway." She pointed from where she was coming. "I am viewing information regarding hostiles, demons." She pointed towards the way that Jack had told her. "I seek champions. Have you heard their songs?" The two guards stared at her for a few seconds and then looked at one another. They leaned close and began to speak rapidly in a tongue that sounded like a mashup of quasi-High Olden and something else entirely. Then one faced her and held up a hand. "Please, gracious officer, the Thunder King will retrieve." It was Rooks's turn to frown in confusion as the guard said that to her, but she stayed where she was. Then the guard turned and began to run deeper into the town, as the other just watched her nervously. Up the path, she saw people start to stick their heads out of the basic stone and wood buildings, and could hear the murmurings of people talking then. She didn't need to understand their tongue to know that gossip about her arrival was spreading through the town like a wildfire. But they weren't excited to see her. She could see the nervous dread with which they viewed her from around corners and through shutters. She only had to wait a few minutes before she saw the guard running back towards her, with company in tow. There were 3 more guards with spears and 2 women. One was decorated in some sort of harness made of bits from the champions, and the other olden scraps held together with multicolored bits of cloth, and even silver, it looked like. The other was a woman in a rather simple-looking dress, but Rooks noticed her hands were tied together before her. What was going on? Just as they reached her, the woman in the olden scrap outfit yelled at the guards in their native tongue, and they quickly dropped to the ground. Rooks had seen bowing before, but these guards went beyond that. They were fully on the ground, face planted in the dirt. Then the woman in charge spoke up and waved with her hands. "Gracious guest of the Thunder King, we are so filled with remorse and guilt to keep him waiting. We have no idea that the heretic was required in this presence." We merely thought to prevent her from returning. We are ever fearful of his wrath, that I presume that your great one. His song has fallen directly upon her ears alone." The woman then pushed the prisoner forward towards Rook's. Up close, she could see the necklace that the woman was wearing, and it caught her eye immediately. The follower was the one of the centerpiece looked like the star rose, which only grew in a very select areas, usually high on the mountains and under very specific circumstances, none of which she expected to see around here. "I promise I mean Thunder King's service. I mean flowers please him." The prisoner gasped out, and the other woman screamed at her in the native tongue for a moment, and the prisoner looked down and away. "Hold!" Rooks held up a hand before the other woman went too far. The gears were turning in her head as she quickly pieced together what was going on. The locals must not have had any awakening if they were still in a primitive of state. The idea of the Thunder King also pointed to the only culprit that she could think of. "This one has heard the song directly?" she asked and pointed to the prisoner. "Yes, gracious guest," the woman in charge said with a deep bow. "Free her hands." Rooks commanded then, and without hesitation the other woman drew a knife from her harness and cut the prisoner's hands free of the rope. Rooks turned to climb back onto the grav bike. "Get on." The prisoner looked nervous but nodded and adjusted her dress a bit up and climbed back onto the grav bike. "Hold tight," Rooks advised then, and started driving forward slowly by grav bike standards, but still fast enough to make the prisoner cry out in surprise for a moment and squeeze her tight. She waited until they were far enough away from the edge of the village not to be overheard before she stopped the bike and looked back at the supposed heretic. "Where did you see the, Thunder King?" "In the Valley of Bones," the heretic replied. "Point," Rooks urged, and sure enough the woman pointed past her to the Valley of the Dead Champions that she had seen. Rooks picked up speed again and let the other woman cling tight to her. She quickly sped up to the nearest ridge to drop back into the valley that she had seen earlier, and past a crackling, partially ruined stone house that was set before a massive field of gardens. Rooks was impressed with the scale of the work done in the valley, but she had to focus on the dead champions ahead of them. What would the Imperator look like? As she looked through the field of dead champions, she figured that she might start near the massive old artillery emplacements. When the giant cannon began to turn towards her, however, she gasped and slid her bike to a stop. The heretic squeezed her tighter, and they watched, but Rooks didn't say anything for a moment, and then she heard the loudest, most soulful song that she had ever heard come from the single champion before her. She saw its legs start to move. Each had to be 50 meters long, at least, as it picked itself up out of the bones of the dead champions and began to walk towards them. Please tell the Thunder King that I mean no anger. I mean service, gift flowers." "Anger him?" Rooks asked as she finally snapped out of it. Then she remembered the heretic's situation and shook her head. "No, you didn't anger him. That necklace you're wearing is a gift from him." She snorted a little and wondered what sort of pilot would give a native a gift like that and yet still play at being a god. She might have some difficulty getting help from the pilot like that. But for now she focused on the champion's frame, walking closer. It was truly massive. The cannon had to be as long as Jack's was tall, if not longer. And there was other emplacements set on the body of the colossal warframe. As the machine got closer, Rooks noticed that it very carefully stepped around the edges of the gardens, not trampling on any of the flowers. It didn't have any more far to get closer to them, not with those massive legs able to carry the great distances fairly easily. As the giant red eye at the center of the unit of the main body looked down at her, she heard the deepest rumble of the champion's voice ever. "Identify yourself," it spoke in regular Olden. "I am Marshal Rooks Pack Vander. Who are you?" she called back. "I am Imperator," the champion rumbled back. "No, not your champion. I mean your name, the pilot." Rooks called out in annoyance. "I have no pilot," the champion rumbled back and made her blink in surprise. She'd never heard of that before. As far as she knew, all champions were required to be linked to a pilot in order to function. "I am Imperator," the champion repeated. Then the eye shifted a little. "Does she speak?" Rooks looked over his shoulder at the nervous woman clinging to her. "A bit of High Olden," she answered. "Gardener," the champion rumbled out in High Olden then. "Thank you for the flowers. They are very lovely." "You are welcome, most gracious Thunder King," she called out. They think you are a god, a vengeful one at that. Rooks called out at the towering champion before her. Unfortunate, it replied in Alden. Then he looked away from her and back towards the gate. You activated the gate. I didn't. My champion did. He went crazy here. Something about echoes, and you. I saw something about a nexus, she called out. The gate should have stayed closed. It will draw even more attention. It kept talking as if it hadn't said a word. Tell me, Marshal Rooks, Pack Vander, do you have people you love? Rooks blinked at the question. It certainly didn't sound like something a champion would ask. Not even Jack. Yes, she answered. Then gather your champion and all of the allies you have, Marshal Rooks, Pack Vander, because the demons are coming and we must fight to protect the ones we love. I shall sing a battle once more so that the echoes of my kin can be given life again. We match the echoes and shall finish what was once started. Go to your champion, Marshal Rooks, Pack Vander. I shall await you in the mountain pass. Tell the gardener I look forward to seeing her flowers when I return. The Imperator began to turn for something that massive he wasn't going anywhere quickly. Wait, I have questions. Rooks yelled out as he started to pull away. Listen to the echoes. They shall tell you all that you need to know. The Imperator answered as he just kept moving. Rooks watched as his 6 massive legs slowly worked the way through the graveyard and up the valley to break in the mountain that she could barely see in the distance. Thunder King leave? The woman behind Rooks asked then. Yeah, he said to watch over the gardens. He likes them. Rooks answered and nodded for the woman to get off. She wondered what the massive champion had meant by the bit about the echoes. But as she pondered that, she heard him begin the sing of all across the valley. She saw the remains of the champions flicker to life partially and sing out with him. It was a battle song, plain and simple. She frowned as she realized what he meant by listening to the echoes. The Imperator was going to war. Then, to her surprise, the Imperator's tone changed and she heard a softer note, a longing that she'd never heard in a champion song before. That's when it hit her. The ones we love. She echoed out and glancing at the gardener, who was watching as the Imperator slowly walked towards the danger that hid beyond the horizon. After a moment, she smiled wide and swung her bike to retrieve Jack. All anxiety had been about the danger posed on this planet faded away, because she realized that no demon stood a chance against him. She knew how hard humans would fight for one of their pack, for someone they loved. So what chance did demons have? None. Not when a war machine had fallen in love. And that, my friends, is the end of this Reddit Quickie. I hope that you enjoyed. If you'd like to support the channel or the author, all the stuff is down below. And as always, I hope that you guys have a good one, and I'll see you in the next story. Cheers.